Hi, everyone, and welcome to our wonderful Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysiewicz. This is our rescheduled Tuesday talk because unfortunately our last Tuesday talk was Tropical Storm Isaias, which was quite something. So, Susan, I know you've been very involved and we just had another storm. I know you've been touring all over the state, seeing damage and helping out with that. So tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing.
Absolutely. Well, first I'll just say we just seem to not be able to catch a break here in Connecticut because we've gone from a pandemic, which we're still in, to tropical storms and microbursts. But this past Friday, I had the opportunity to tour with the governor on North Haven and also Hamden and East Haven.
Yeah.
And I have to say that those communities have been hit before by tropical storms and hurricanes, and the damage was quite extensive. I mean, Branford and North Haven had almost their entire towns without electricity. And East Haven had its football field in the Foxon area of East Haven completely destroyed. So I'd never seen anything like it. It was as if someone had taken the turf off of the football field and shredded it up. And so there was just turf in shreds all over the field. And
that's not inexpensive to replace.
Yes. So the mayor was saying the damages were estimated to be over $1 million just to fix the field.
Wow.
Also, the bleachers, lots of metal bleachers, looked like they had just been crumpled up. It was quite something.
Was that where a tornado had touched down? Because I know there was one where they said it had touched down.
So yeah, so it was interesting. We were talking to homeowners in East Haven, in the northern section of East Haven. And one woman told us that she looked out into her backyard and her shed had been caught up in the funnel of a tornado and she was just watching it spin.
Right. Kind of like Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, exactly.
But not in a good way, yes.
No, not in a good way. And the other thing is we met up with folks from the National Weather Service who'd been sent to look at the damage, and they can look at the trees and the tree damage to see, sort of what had happened. And because some of the trees looked like they had been the tops had been twisted right off, they were saying that was evidence of tornadoes and microbursts. Yeah. And there were a lot of trees that were just literally ripped out of the ground from the roots. Mm-hmm. So it was quite something. But I think, one interesting lesson was United Illuminating had power back up to those towns either that day or the next day.
Yeah.
And the governor and I on Friday morning went to the town hall in North Haven. The CEO of UI was there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And the CEO talked about how there were several hundred crews there on the ground doing the work, and that they were working very closely with public works officials in North Haven. And so the governor and I were impressed, first, that the CEO would be right there with us. And the mayor there, Mike Frieda, said they'd been working hand in glove to get the roads cleared so that the utility crews could go in. Yeah. So it really was quite a different experience than what we saw with Eversource.
Well, and we had, 12 or 13 days in our district with absolutely no power for some people. And, when you think about the movement now to take back our grid. I've talked for a long time about more microgrids. We have to have them. That's the reality. It's going to be expensive to bury power lines, but it's something that it may not be all of them, but if we can get more of those buried, we certainly need to. And the different response. I think that executives at Eversource, could have responded in a much better way than they chose to respond. And that is unfortunate because, the people who lost their medicines, the doctor's offices that lost, tens of thousands of dollars in vaccinations, I think that even just, the people who lost all the food. And as we've talked about, you and I, because we've been out at Rentschler Field for Food Share,
This
of
is
all
not
the
a time
years,
to lose
yes,
food.
right.
Right.
Of all the years to lose food, this is not the year. And even, so many people I talk to who thankfully they can afford to replace it, but they'd been to the grocery store that morning and they were thinking, oh, well, it'll just be a small thing. And then it really wasn't a small thing. Or our business owners who don't have generators, who, especially one of our local businesses that, they're immigrant business owners, like many. And they said, oh, it'll just be a couple hours. They didn't live here in 2011. And so they hadn't lived through that days and days experience of no power. And they lost, their entire stock of cheese and had to throw it all out and, start over. And with the tariffs that have been on cheese this year, it's a snowball effect economically for people, as you know.
No, it really is. And I've heard from, seniors and families. Look, we have had 350,000 unemployment applications since COVID. And you and I know, because of the work we do with food banks, how people are struggling and how precious food is. And to have seniors, who are on fixed incomes, or people who are literally, living unemployment check to hear that food was spoiled is just really so disheartening. And I, on behalf of my constituents, asked both UI and Eversource for reimbursement, because people had hundreds of dollars worth of lost food. And the answer, sadly, from both was, sorry, we can't do that. You could look to your homeowner's insurance. So here's what we need to do when you get elected to the legislature, and we have you there. And I do think now there will be a lot of voices there for people to be asking for refunds and reimbursements if that should happen. And the medication is frustrating too, because we know how expensive prescription drugs are for folks.
Well, and not to mention, I had good friends. She reached out in a panic because we did have, power from a generator, and we had, a fridge that we could put things in. She said, I just need to bring over some ice packs. Can you freeze these ice packs overnight? Because the medicine for her husband is literally life and death. When he needs it, and it has to be refrigerated. And so the thought of that, and these are medicines that, I can't even discuss how expensive they are. So yes, that is absolutely something that I want to look into when I get to the legislature, because I think that we have to do better by people. We just absolutely have to. And I wanted to go back a little bit to just the economic impact this year of COVID, because when, in terms of, like you said, what we've seen with the food bank work, in Canton, the numbers leveled off for July for unemployment, but in Avon, the numbers went up a little bit in July. We're not quite bouncing back. I know Food Share is still supplying food through September, over 4.6 million pounds at just that location already. So, you're seeing it all over the state, I would imagine.
So we have, I've seen you at Rentschler Field and in some of our central Connecticut based food distribution sites, but I've been to Norwalk, I've been to Bridgeport, New Haven, and the need is still very great. And what we've saw is at the end of July, the federal unemployment benefits, stopped. And so therefore you could see the need go back up again, and people were concerned about that. And I'll just say, because we've been talking about seniors and small business owners, another concern that I have, and this is a federal issue, is with the post office, because seniors, especially veterans,
Yeah.
depend on the mail service to get their medications.
Right.
And a lot of small business people depend on the mail to send their products out, to receive materials
Right.
for the business. And, this is a grave concern to me that there are so many mail sorting machines out of service. Mailboxes have been taken out of towns and cities. And this is a real equity issue for people around the state.
It is. And I will say, that was one of the things we talked about at our local USPS, rally for the postal workers a couple weeks ago. We've got our farmers. We had, baby chicks arriving dead. I mean, that is huge when that happens. Yeah. And I mean, when you're counting on, there are things that you just don't think about. Our single mothers, waiting on child support checks, and you have, it's that poor veteran's family that waited 12 days for his, remains. I mean, I think it's really over the top when you consider. I am grateful for the foresight of our Secretary of the State to install those ballot boxes, because at least we have those,
Right. And I guess that brings us to, the election that we have coming up on November 3rd. And between September 8th and September 11th, the Secretary of the State will be sending out those absentee ballot applications. So in the primaries that we had, my family and I voted those. We first filled out the application, and then a couple of weeks later, we got the ballots, we voted those, and we put them in the mail. And I would just say to anybody who's listening, if they are at all concerned about the Postal Service and you have the ability, please take those ballots and put them in the ballot boxes that are installed at the front of town halls. That's what they're there for. And we don't want anybody to worry about it.
Well, and I would just add to that, because we are hearing it a ton on the phones. We actually worked the polls on primary day as a team, and we heard it there too. It's critical to remember that, yes, we want you to use those ballot boxes. Only use the ballot box for your town. You can only put your ballot into your town's ballot box. And I'm going to be saying that over and over again, because unfortunately, some of our local town clerks did discover that even though it was Avon or Canton, they found other towns' ballots in their box, and they then have to mail those to the town that they originated from, which that defeats the whole purpose of having the box. So the good news is that those applications, as you said, they're going to go out to all registered voters. So if anyone has any concern, because we don't have no excuse voting yet in Connecticut.
Another reason why we need you in the legislature.
Something else I'd like to work on, that, once we have no excuse voting, that'll be easier. But for November 3rd, if you have health concerns, or if for any other reason you don't want to walk in and vote in person, you can apply for that absentee ballot. We've been doing a campaign in terms of the college students, because so many have still gone away to college, because it is that two-step process. And I always joke with parents, and I'm sure you do too, send them with stamps, because sometimes they don't even want to go to the mailroom, or they don't know where to get the stamps, or, bless them. But college students, you know how it is.
My kids are not used to mail.
No.
How they get U.S. Postal Service, no. But that is a really important thing to remember for your college student who is off. And the good news is we do have the month of September and the month of October. But here's the thing. I don't want anybody sitting after they've, put the ballot either in the mail or one of those ballot boxes, worried that somehow the town clerk isn't going to get it. So my suggestion is, please do call your town clerk a couple of days after you either mail or put the ballot in the box. Because if for whatever reason they don't get it, they don't have it, you can always literally go to the town clerk's office and vote the ballot in person. And then you can do it in a private spot and then hand the completed ballot to the town clerk. So I don't want anybody worried that they have to go to a polling place if they don't want to. Because, I know that people have legitimate health concerns about it, although I do want to give a shout out to the election officials who really, you saw, they really worked hard to try to make it a place where There was social distancing,
Mm-hmm.
as contactless as possible,
Right.
So that's important. And I tell everybody, make a plan now to vote, and then
Absolutely.
make sure you execute it.
Yes. And just as a reminder, while the applications are coming out between the 8th and the 11th, the ballots are not coming out till October 2nd. So that's important because people, sometimes forget the two-step process, or they forget it's the application first and then the ballot. And, just to reiterate that they have the opportunity to do
Both
that.
steps are important.
Yes.
Fill out the application all you want, but the
Right.
real deal is the ballot. So
Right.
that's important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while you're filling out forms, here's my segue for all this wonderful work that you have done around the census. And I'm so proud of Connecticut because we are ahead of the national average, but we're not ahead by much, and we still need to get those forms filled out.
No, and I'm very proud to report to you today. Our office put out a statement that we are at 90% completion.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
which is great because we're one of the top 5 or 6 states in the country.
Great.
And that 90%, people should know, is partially the self-response rate. If you called, you mailed in, or you went on the internet, you self-responded. But since July 23rd, we've had people in our state knocking on doors.
Yeah.
Those are the enumerators. And there's a separate number of called the enumeration rate. So in our state, approximately 70% was self-response and 20% was the enumeration rate. And our enumerators will be working in Connecticut until the end of September. So hopefully with their continued work, they can finish our state by the end of September. But I think you should tell people what the concerns are, Eleni, because you and I were alluding to this before.
Well, we were, trying to move the data up. And honestly, I think people don't necessarily realize the value of the census to our state and to our towns. And it's billions of dollars. And, that is a huge, in terms of billions of dollars, in terms of the huge pot that's on the line that Connecticut can receive, portions of the total. It's really important for us. We have to make sure that everybody's filling it out, because trying to move back the deadline, or trying to say, oh, no, we're good, enough people have filled it out. I just know, and I've been doing, interestingly, some ancestry work. And there's really something to seeing those signatures of my great-grandparents, on those
filled out the census. I
know.
know.
Especially as Greek American women, they were filling out those census.
Yes, of course they were. And it's interesting too, because people should know that for every person we undercount, we lose $2,900 a person. Yeah. So I was at a farmer's market and I met a lady who was there with her 3 kids. And I said, have you filled out the census? She said, no. And I said, well, look, there's a census enumerator at a table right there. Can you pretty please fill it out? And she was like, yeah, but it's going to take a long time. And I said, promise you can do it in just a few minutes. And I said, and this is what really got her to do it. I said, now each of your 3 kids are in school, right? And she said, yes. And I said, so your kids are worth $29,000 times 3. So almost $100,000 is going to your community over 10 years to support your school system. And her eyes went wide and she said, okay, I'm going to go do it. And I watched her do it in just a few minutes.
Well, and I think I did mine online in less than 5 minutes. I mean, it was so fast. It couldn't have been more painless. I mean, it really is so easy. And, making sure if you have a college student that you're not counting them, because they are counted elsewhere, because they don't live in your house most of the year. Right. My hope is that even though mine is home online, they are still counting her in North Carolina.
Yes, they are. Yes, that would be group quarters. Yes.
Yes. So, but I think that's part of the reason why I do these Tuesday talks. We've done, one with State Comptroller Kevin Lembo and with State Treasurer Sean Wooden. I think it's important for people to understand the civics behind all of this public service that people are choosing to do, like you do, like Sean does. We we elect folks, but we don't always necessarily, like I get a lot of, oh, you're going to go back to DC. It's like, no, 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 no. I may have grown up there, but I'm headed to Hartford, hopefully.
Yeah.
So it's important that we even educate people about the census, because it doesn't happen that often. And we have to make sure that we Connecticut are getting our fair share of that federal dollar pool.
And I do want to make an appeal to the people who are watching this, because in August, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and women's right to vote. And, you know, we are making some good strides.
Right.
Although it took us until 1965 to get women of color and people of color the right to vote. But we had some wonderful people here in Connecticut that fought for this, like Kate Hepburn's mom, or like Alice Paul, who lived in Ridgefield. But here's where I think we really need more work and help, and why one of the reasons I'm so excited that you're running. You would think that after 100 years of having women participating in elections, that 50% of our legislature would be women, but alas, no. 26%, 27% of the people in our state Senate, state House are women. And look, I just think our country would be better off if we had more smart, competent women at every level. You know?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
So that's why I'm just volunteering that I'm proud to support you, and
thank you.
Voters should send you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, and I mean, we talked at the beginning of the year of what this year was going to look like in terms of celebrating the 100 years. That went completely, to the wayside. We do a lot of work with the Women's Commission. It's so fascinating, because when you talk about the parity of women of color getting the vote and how long that took, I just keep thinking, we just had Black Women's Equal Pay Day. And our Latina friends won't have theirs till I believe it's in November. And for people who are not familiar, when we talk about Equal Pay Day, and it is broken out by race for women, that means a man works 12 months and then a woman has to work those 12 months plus additional months to equal the same salary. And so I talk about it frequently, because I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And people say, oh, there's no wage gap. And we've certainly done a lot to help close it in Connecticut, but we still have work to do left on closing that wage gap.
Yes, we do. And I'm so glad you mentioned pay equity, because this is one of the top issues that we focus on at the Governor's Council on Women and Girls, which I co-chair with Melissa McCaw. And you're so right that Black women make 79 cents on the dollar that white men make, and Latina women are much lower still, and that means more hours that they have to work. And so we've been working on the council first to address the pay gap that we see amongst state employees. And Kevin, you mentioned Kevin Lembo, and he's the person who makes the paychecks available to all the state employees. And interestingly, white women made dollar for dollar what white men made in state service. So that was interesting. Black women made like 89 cents on the dollar, but there's still more to do. And I think one of the reasons that the pay gap was smaller in state service is because of the union advocacy. But there's still more work to do. So we've got a lot of work, and if you care about uplifting women and families, we always say, women's issues are family issues and economic issues. Then you should be thinking, as you make your decisions in November about who to send to Hartford, who to send to Washington, who is fighting to reduce that gap, because it doesn't take away from anyone. It only adds
absolutely
family resources.
Yeah. And I always add to that about women's issues being economic issues. If we're 50% of the population, then we need to be at least 50% of the decision making. And we need to make sure that there is, equal justice under the law when it comes to that. So I really appreciate that you are always pushing for that, have always pushed for that, because it's critically important, and we can't ever stop until there is that equity for everyone.
No, and this inequity for women is something, and people of color is something that has just been laid bare by COVID, because
Absolutely.
the people who were unemployed and hit the hardest were women, because it was retail, it was hospitality, it was restaurant workers,
Yes.
hospital workers in the medical profession, and nonprofit folks who were hit the hardest, and
Right.
those were mainly women. Um,
Yes.
so
And when you look at I feel like this pandemic has both been a crisis, but also an opportunity, because the reality is that we really do see now, if you didn't get it before, now you get it, the childcare crisis we have in this country. And as schools, we had our first day of school here yesterday in Avon, some parents choosing to go with the hybrid model, some people choosing the, remote learning option. And, it really, it's illustrating that we need more childcare, because and it has to be affordable, because it has really created such a discrepancy for so many people.
And so this is what I say about childcare, because I don't think people fully appreciated this, but childcare, affordable quality
Yeah,
childcare, is part of the infrastructure, just like a road
it drives the economy.
that we need to
Yeah,
reopen the economy, right?
right.
And during COVID-19, our state lost an estimated 45,000 childcare spots, because people who had the smaller family daycares
Right.
closed, or some of the large centers closed because everyone was home because they were unemployed or they were working from home.
Right.
Now people are trying to go back and those spots are not there. And with the hybrid option, your town's doing that. A lot of towns are doing that. You know, if your kids are in school Monday and Tuesday, but
Right.
home Wednesday and Thursday, what do you do if you can't be home to supervise? So this
Yeah.
is a huge issue. And I'm very happy that our federal delegation, led by Rosa DeLauro, is really fighting to put increased federal funding into legislation before Congress and the Senate, which hopefully it should be a bipartisan issue, and we should
Right.
get that done.
Right, because it's all Americans. It's not affecting one group over another. It's everybody. And that is what I guess I mean the most by this being an opportunity. It's an opportunity, that's, and I will just, close before we finish here with, that's what I saw at Rentschler. I recently said to a friend, normally when you talk about food insecurity, you say picture a kid, or picture a senior, or picture your grandparents. Now it's picture your friends, every single one of your friends, and picture them in the bread line, because that's what we saw at Rentschler immediately. It was every race,
Demographic.
yeah, every demographic. And people would show up in a car that looked like it was going to drop their muffler at your feet, and there are people that were showing up driving Mercedes, and there were people that were showing up that were Christian and Muslim, and and every subfaith, and every Jewish, so it has really been sort of a great equalizer among people. And I just hope that as we are building back stronger, and I know that we will, and especially in Connecticut, that we look at this as the opportunity to really make some definable change that will change lives. And
I will say that we can, what I'd like to say to close, and has been a discussion, is that we all have to vote, like our
right,
lives depend on it,
right,
because they really do. This election is about our economy. It's about our public health. It's about our democracy. It's about racial justice. It's about so many things that are life and death issues.
right,
And I'll just say that our governor has been a really tremendous leader in the face of all of these new challenges. And every day we kind of hold our breath when we get the numbers back as to our infection rate. But we feel very grateful to people because they have been wearing the masks. They've been keeping the social distance. They've been doing, 99% of the time, the things that we ask them to do. And it's not easy, and everybody's getting a little tired of it. But we want to thank people for doing that, because we are really all in this together. And we're not going to be able to completely reopen our economy until we get through this.
Well, it was interesting, Tropical Storm Isaias, to bring it all the way around. I felt like that was the most illustrative point of the pandemic, was we're not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm, because we really have had to come together in a lot of ways. And I'm grateful to see it, because I think that we are stronger together. And the more that we can work together, and the more that we can think of one another as, a community, as a, I don't want to say village, but certainly as a community, the better off we all are. So I thank you so much for today. I appreciate this conversation. We were all over the place as usual, but that's how it goes, right?
In a good way.
In a good way. So thank you again so much for your time. Truly appreciate it. And unfortunately, we couldn't do it live, but we'll get this up as soon as possible, and people can watch it later on today.
And it's been a pleasure, and good luck to you. And everybody remember, November 3rd is coming up.
November 3rd. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.